Well, a Berkshire Hathaway shareholders meeting is partly a class in business. It's partly a fun festival. It's sort of a Mardi Gras for people that come every year. It's a chance for us to have a lot of fun and meet the people that have entrusted us with their money, and we want to make sure they have a good time, and we hope they learn more about not only Berkshire, but just the attitude they should have toward investments in general. Berkshire is a corporation, but it goes beyond that. In terms of our feeling toward the people who are shareholders, we regard them as our partners. Charlie and I are the managing partners. The others are silent partners, but the attitude is partnership. They're not some faceless group of people, and that's why at the annual meeting, I love seeing 40,000 of them or so. It gives real meaning to what we're doing every day. Yeah, well, I'm probably one of the few CEOs that actually enjoys writing the annual report, or as some writers say, I enjoy having written it. Having written it, the actual process of writing can be a lot of work. But I want to tell them or talk to them about what I would like to know if our positions were reversed and they were running the company and I was the shareholder. So I mentally envision my two sisters, Doris and Bertie. They're very, very smart. They have a very high percentage of their net worth in Berkshire, so they're interested, but they're not following business day to day. So I pretend that they've been gone for a year, and I'm bringing them up to date about the kind of things I would like to know if they were running the business and I was the silent partner. Yeah, Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting, and in it he had a picture of himself at bat and the strike zone broken into, I think, 77 squares, all the way from the letters down to his knees and the width of the plate. And he said the most important thing in batting was to wait for the right pitch, that if he waited for the pitch that was really in his sweet spot, he would bat 400, and if he had to swing at something on the lower corner, he would probably bat 235. And in investing, I'm in a no-called strike business, which is the best business you can be in. If the count on Ted went to 0-2 or 1-2, and that ball came across the plate in that corner where he only batted 235, he still had to swing or he would have been called out. In investing, there are no called strikes. I can look at 1,000 different companies, and I don't have to be right on every one of them, or even 50 of them, or even 25 of them. The only way I can have a strike called is if I swing and miss. So I can pick the ball I want to hit, and I can wait there, and the pitcher can throw pitch after pitch, and if they are not in my sweet spot, I don't have to swing. And that's an enormous advantage over most businesses. The problem, of course, is that if you have an audience that is yelling, "Swing, you bum," while you're waiting there with a bat on your shoulder time after time, you may get tempted to swing at the wrong pitches. So you have to make sure that you don't psychologically get in the position where you feel you have to swing at pitches that really aren't in your sweet spot. Yeah, probably if I make one great decision every 2 years, you have to make very, very few right decisions in investing in your life. You might say that a person who bought Berkshire Hathaway 50 years ago only had to make one decision. And there's a temptation for people to act far too frequently in stocks simply because they're so liquid. They know they can't buy and sell farms every day or buy and sell apartment houses every day. They can buy and sell stocks, and in a very liquid market with very low transaction costs. And that should be a huge advantage, but people turn it into a disadvantage because they think the availability of the opportunity to trade is something that they have to take advantage of every day, and actually active trading just costs them a lot of commissions. The main thing to do is buy into a wonderful business and just sit there with it. I would say I get very, very little hate mail. I get a lot of requests for money. I had one fellow that would ask me for $1.3 billion. He wrote me about 70 times, and he never dropped his price. I kind of admired his position of non-negotiation. But I, there may be a social, probably when I wrote about taxes, I got a few letters saying, you know, why don't you just send all your money to the U.S. government if you think it's so wonderful. But I would say there's very, very, very little hate mail. Well, Omaha and Nebraska are home to me, and I had a great time growing up here until I was about 12, and we moved to Washington. I made lots of friends. Everything about it seems like home. I go back. I've probably gone back at least a half a dozen times to my grammar school, Rose Hill, and I go there for fairs they may have. Occasionally, I might even talk to a grade school class or two. There's a lot of continuity. There's a lot of community. There's a lot of friendship. I probably know the parents, the grandparents now of a lot of people I meet. But if I go to a restaurant here, there's a lot of people just say hi, Warren, to me that either I know or that they're just friendly. My children had a good time growing up here. They had their aunts and uncles and grandparents living within a mile or two. So it's a very solid place and friendly place in which to grow up and in which to conduct a business. We have 25 people in the office, and if you go back a year ago to our Christmas party, we're going to take a picture of the 25 this year. It's the exact same 25 as a year ago, the exact same ones. Now, we have a company with 350,000 employees. And here in the headquarters, I don't think there's another company in the world that probably didn't have, we didn't go up one, we didn't go down one, and we didn't change one. Well, working in Omaha certainly maximizes both my enjoyment and my output in terms of work. I mean, everything is made to order. I live 5 minutes away from the office, and I've been making that 5-minute trip back and forth now for 53 years. There's no stress. I have no stress whatsoever in business. I think it's probably helped me not only live longer, but I certainly live happier as well. When I came back from New York in early 1956, I had no idea what I was going to do. I knew I was going to take some classes at school. I knew I was going to do a lot of reading. I had no idea that I would set up an investment partnership. But a few months after I came back, some members of the family said, what should we do with our money? And I said, well, I'm not going back in the business of selling stocks, but if you would like to join me in a partnership, somewhat along the lines of the one I'd worked for when I was with Ben Graham, I said, I'll be glad to do it. So within a couple of months after coming back, I set up the first partnership. And I was then renting a house. I never owned a house to that point. And I was renting a house at a block and a half away from the family grocery store. And it had a little tiny room off the bedroom, and that became the office. And then 2 years later, I bought the house I live in today in 1958. And that too had a room off the bedroom, and I worked out of that room for about 4 years. So there was about 6 years in which I worked at home. I drove down and picked up the mail. I wrote checks eventually. I was running 11 partnerships finally. I wrote all the checks individually. I filed 11 income tax returns. I took delivery on stocks for all the different companies. I was a one-man band there for 6 years. There came a time at the start of 1962, I moved to Kiewit Plaza. They were just building the building then, finishing it. And I hired two people. One was a secretary, and one was a fellow that analyzed investments with me, Bill Scott. Bill and I are still friends. He still lives in Omaha. And we started to look like we really were a business. By the time I moved to Kiewit Plaza, we had $7 million invested. We started, the first partnership started with $105,100. I put up the 100, and the other people put up the 105,000. And then, as people came along and saw what was being done in the earlier partnerships, I made this mistake of forming new partnerships. So I had this multiple multiple checks, multiple tax returns, and all that sort of thing. And finally, it just made sense to put them together. So when I put it together in January 1st, 1962, we had 7 million. And a lot of that was new people that had come in over the years, and some of it, a fair amount, was profits. I closed down the partnerships, well, just one partnership by that point. I closed down the partnership at the end of 1969 because I really wasn't seeing opportunities in the investment world, and there were some crazy things going on in the late 60s, and I didn't want to I understood what people were doing, but I didn't believe in what they were doing. So I didn't want to join that game. On the other hand, I didn't like sitting it out and having my results look bad. So I decided to give the money back to the partners. I didn't think, I didn't want my competitive juices to force me to play in a game where I really didn't think I had an advantage anymore. So it was a lifestyle decision. I had all the money I needed, and the partners had all done well, and I had a way of providing for their continued shepherding by a couple of friends of mine that were very good managers. I had various social ideas too, but the two were not in conflict. I could have gone on a double track throughout the rest of my life, and in a certain sense I have. But I didn't have that all planned out back in 1969 when I decided to wind up the partnership. There was a time in the late 60s when my wife Susie said to me, she said, I don't mind being married to the next to last guy in the country to have a crew cut, but she said, I really wouldn't want to be married to the last guy. So at that point I left the crew cut style. We had a terrific. Susie was great at planning parties, and so she was very imaginative. We had loads of friends, so I liked the stage delicatessen in New York. So when we were in New York, we'd always go by there, Susie and I. So she decided to have a stage delicatessen party in Omaha, and I don't know how many people we had. We had a lot of people over that night, and everybody had a lot of fun. It was the 1960s, and she was imaginative about parties, and she was good at it. She threw herself into it and came up with a lot of great ideas, and I just went and ate the food and paid the bills. The partnership had acquired control of Berkshire Hathaway in 1965. And although I never took the chairman's role or the president's role, I was in charge of Berkshire Hathaway. We owned control of it, so I made all the decisions. I bought National Indemnity. I bought the Sun newspapers for it. The fellow who operated the textile business checked with me on buying new equipment. And so I was the CEO, but I never saw that. There was no reason to take the title. Malcolm Chase, who was chairman, was a wonderful gentleman who had helped me in acquiring control of Berkshire. So there was no reason to change his title. He remained the chairman, but he was not running the business. He let me run the business, and there was no need. It was clear that Buffett Partnership was the controlling shareholder. When we dissolved the partnership at the end of 1969 and distributed the Berkshire stock, I took on the title of chairman just to formalize it going forward now that the control block had really been broken up with our various partners. But nothing really changed in 1970 from 1969. Well, I think the desire to participate in some of the conversation on things like civil rights or the right to family planning or something like that. I mean, if I can't speak out on it, who can? I mean, I can't be damaged in terms of my employer firing me because I made some talk someplace, and so I've had strong feelings on certain social policies. You can't pop off too often. I mean, there's some very, very rich guy who goes around and pining on everything can get a little boring after a while. So I don't want to do it too often. But when I do see myself paying a lower tax rate than anybody else in the office, I mean, that bothers me. The degree of inequality in the richest society that the world has ever seen bothers me. I don't want to throw away that greatest society that's ever existed in the process of changing things. But I feel like speaking out. I like running Berkshire, but I can't pretend I'm not a citizen either. When I've said at the shareholders meeting that I'm willing to work for a very small salary, but I'm not willing to put my morals in a blind trust, and that does not come with the job. So if people that are shareholders of Berkshire are bothered a little bit about me speaking out on taxes or something of the sort, they'll either have to accept it or go elsewhere, because I really don't feel I should give up my citizenship just because I have a job as head of a major corporation. America has been unbelievably good to me and my family. There's 7 billion people in this world, and only 320 million plus are in the United States. I mean, I was very, very lucky to be born in this country and in a time when America's prospered like never before. So and it isn't because I'm a better person than the guy next door. I'm wired in a certain way that enables me, just like some people are good at chess, some people are good at bridge, some people are good at writing musical scores. I happen to be good at something that pays off enormously in this society. It wouldn't have paid off that well 200 years ago. It wouldn't have paid off that well in many other countries. So America's been extraordinary for me, and it's going to be even better in the future overall. So I would like to see everybody participate, not equally at all, but nobody should have a bad economic future in the United States. We could afford for everybody to have who's willing to work to get a decent result in the society. Well, the best gift I was ever given was to have the father that I had when I was born. I mean, I had nothing to do with that. I was genetically blessed with a certain wiring that's very useful in a highly developed market system where there's lots of chips on the table, and I happen to be good at that game, and other people are wonderful with their hands in medicine. They can do things surgically that I never could do. Other people can play the piano magnificently. There's all kinds of different gifts, but I happen to be given one that has enormous commercial value at this time in this country. So I would, but where I've really been blessed is with the people that I've come in contact with. Some of them I'll give myself a little credit for choosing to be associated with, but if you start off with my dad, I had no voice in that, and just think of this wonderful start that gave me in the first 20 years of my life, for really as long as he lived. Well, Charlie Munger has been a wonderful partner. He's ungodly smart. He's got a much broader intellect than I do. He's a smarter guy in about 100 fields than I am, and he's magnificent at being able to condense important ideas into just a very few words, and he's always honest in what he tells me. So I listen to him. In fact, I just changed my behavior on something last week because of probably a 10-word sentence he said to me. In investing, he had a big impact on me in moving me somewhat away from Ben Graham and looking for really wonderful companies at fair prices rather than fair companies at wonderful prices. So he moved me toward quality businesses. And that was enormously important because it enabled Berkshire to scale up in a way that would have been impossible buying the kind of lower grade businesses we bought at cheap prices originally. Well, Susie, when I was in my teens, I developed really pretty decent skills in terms of business, but I hadn't really come to terms with the world exactly, and I was unbalanced individual. I may still be, but Susie really put me together, and she was the one that had the little watering can, and I was the seed in the soil. But it took the watering can from Susie to help me really grow up and mature. She was a wonderful person, and she believed in me. She put me together, and I would not have been. I would not only turn out to be the person I've turned out to be, but I would not have. I actually wouldn't have been as successful in business without that. She made me more of a whole person. She never cared about money or business at all. One time we had dinner with a friend of mine, Herb Wolf, in New York, and as we were coming back on the subway to Manhattan, he lived out a ways. She said, Warren, she said, how many 100,000s are there in a million? And at that time, I knew I shouldn't turn the checkbook over to her. Well, I don't know that, you'll have to go to Rogers and Hammerstein or somebody to figure out exactly what happens when you meet somebody and, a stranger across the room or something of the sort. But I knew she was for me, so I didn't waste any time. I wasn't getting any place but my pursuit was avid, and so she married me when she was 19. I was 21. I bought the ring. I told Bill Gates when I was trying to sell him a ring when he was going to get married got married on January 1st, 1994. I said, I spent 6% of my net worth on my ring for Susie, so I think when you come out to our jewelry store it's a guideline, but you might vary it a little bit, but 6% is more or less the standard amount. The wedding date was kind of interesting because I was a member of the National Guard here in Nebraska, and on April 19th, 1952, the Missouri River was coming up over its banks, and I was getting married at 3 in the afternoon, and at noon, I got a call, and the guy, I answered the phone, and the fellow said, Corporal Buffett, and I said, yes, sir. And he said, this is Captain Murphy, and he said, what time are you getting married? And I said, 3 o'clock. He said, well, we've been activated, so be at the armory at 5. So that was not an auspicious start for the wedding day. And then a little while later, I got a call from the commanding general of the 34th Division, and he said, I'm countermanding Captain Murphy's orders, so go and have a great time on the honeymoon. Fortunately, the original call from Captain Murphy stuttered somewhat, and otherwise I would have thought it was one of the ushers in the wedding or something playing a game on me. I might have made some comment that would have landed me in the barracks for a few months. I did not wear my glasses at my wedding. I couldn't then. One of the eyes has been corrected somewhat, but I couldn't see anything without my glasses, and I was so nervous that I just decided I'd take off my glasses, and I wouldn't be able to see all those people out there. Well, she had a fantastic voice, and she always liked to sing. I like to sing too, but unfortunately I didn't have the voice she had. But so she decided in the mid-1970s that she'd like to try and do it in front of crowds. And it's no fun initially singing in front of crowds, but I encouraged her to do it, and she started performing here locally some, and then she also did a little bit in New York. My friend Bill Ruane, we started calling him Broadway Bill because he went around Greenwich Village and places lined up gigs for. She was very, very good. Well, I liked to eat everything that I had at my 6th birthday party. I thought the menu there was superb, with hamburgers and hot dogs and Coke and chocolate sundaes, and so I found what agreed to me at a very early age, and I've continued now to age 85, and it still seems to work. I've really never eaten. I don't see any reason to eat your 40th favorite food when you can eat your favorite food, and I've really found I've had $500 meals or maybe even $1,000 meals, and I've found they're not as good as what I can have when I get a good hamburger and some French fries and a Coke. So I don't see any reason to to eat what other people like. And I know that if I'd been eating broccoli and spinach and Brussels sprouts and asparagus all my life, that I don't think I'd have lived this long. I think that it would have seemed like a long time, but I think my diet has worked very well for me. I'm not advocating it for others, but it seems to work very well for me. Well, my mother had a tough time. I mean, her mother ended up in a mental hospital, and she carried a lot of the burdens of her family. Her brother, who she worshipped, died very young, and she was looked at as the mainstay. And she followed my dad obviously to Washington. She pitched in on everything involving my dad, but she had. I'm almost sure that they were migraines. They had a different term in those days for them, and so she carried a lot of the world's burdens on her shoulders, and she could be difficult sometimes, and then she could be wonderful other times. But when she got difficult, the three children felt it. She was very, very bright, and she was very gregarious. She was a good campaigner for my dad, but she'd gone through a lot of strains. I mean, after she graduated from high school, she worked for a couple of years before to get the funds actually to go to the University of Nebraska, where she met my dad, and I think there was a lot of unhappiness, which she never talked about, in her growing up, that affected her attitude to some extent. And I think they didn't call them, I forget the terms that they used in those days, but I think they were migraines, and she was in physical pain a fair amount of the time. Well, he had various nicknames for me. He'd call me Fireball sometimes, and it would, I got very interested in the stock market, so Jesse Livermore was a famous stock speculator. Sometimes he'd call me that. He had a lot of different names for me but probably Fireball was the number one term. I had a lot of energy as a kid. I still have a lot of energy when I'm doing something I like, and I was inquisitive, and I like to talk to grown-ups a lot. So anytime his friends came over, or the family's friends, I would have a great time talking. I usually would talk to the men when they came over, but if I was wandering around the neighborhood, I'd go in and talk to housewives, various places. And I had a lot of energy and ideas, and I'd start little businesses or something of the sort, and I think he kind of was entertained by it, and I think maybe that's where the Fireball came from. Well, when first books I read on investment were actually in my dad's office. I would go down on Saturday he would have lunch down at Johnny's Cafe with his either one or two partners at the South Omaha Feed Company, and so I loved to go to those lunches, but I'd get down there early and I'd be reading the books in the office, and pretty soon I read all the books in the office, so I started going over to the public library, and I loved to just go to the stacks where the business books were, and I read them all the investment books, well before we moved to Washington when I was 12, and read some of them more than once. And I basically loved reading, and the library. We didn't buy books in those days. The library was a great place for me, and I would take the streetcar down often and go to the YMCA and go to the library and then go home around dinner time. I actually got locked into what was then the University of Omaha library one time when I got terribly enmeshed in reading in some stacks that were way in the back, and they locked the place up, and I couldn't get out, so it took me several hours before I could rouse my father-in-law, who was a dean there, and he got a janitor to finally let me out of the library. Well, when we were in Omaha, before we moved to Washington, I would say I was quite gregarious, but I was gregarious with adults as well as kids. I was certainly shy with girls, although that was not unusual in those days. But I like being with people. Focus has always been a strong part of my personality. If I get interested in something, I get really interested, and that was true about any subject. I mean, if I get interested in a new subject, I want to read about it, I want to talk about it, and I want to meet people that are involved in it. But that's true of most of my friends. I mean, Charlie Munger is a very focused guy, for example, and I don't think I could have done remotely what I've been able to do in business if I hadn't had that really intense focus. I mean, I would go through a 2,000-page Moody's manual, page by page at night, looking at companies and thinking about them, and it really paid off. My two sisters, about equidistant on each side of me, a couple years older with Doris, a couple years younger with Bertie, and we had a lot of fun together. They, as they grew older, Doris got interested in boys first because she was the oldest, and so the age difference to some extent affected the precise relationship we had at any time. But I really liked both of my sisters a lot, and we were competitive in certain ways. We used to have spell downs in grade school where you'd have 6 from each class, and you'd go to the next class upward, and those 12 would spell words until there were only 6 remaining, and then they would go up to the further class. It was always my ambition to move up past Doris, who was a couple of years ahead of me, and I'm sure Bertie's ambition was to get past me. So, but we had fun driving in the cars. We had fun singing, a whole bunch of different things. I was lucky to have the sisters I had. When I was born in 1930, the difference between being a male baby and a female baby was huge at birth. My sisters are fully as smart as I am. They got better personalities than I have. Certainly they did in our younger years, particularly. And no one ever said, my dad and mother loved us all equally. The teachers took equal interest in us, but the expectations were just different because I was a boy and they were girls. I mean, the thought was for them that they should marry well and maybe learn to be a secretary or whatever it might be if they wanted to have some temporary employment before they got married and started having children. The expectation with me was that the sky was the limit, and it was just night and day, and that struck me very early on as really incredibly unfair. And of course, I continue to see other examples in my life, but the initial examples really were my sisters. I mean, here were two human beings that terrific personalities, very bright. You couldn't have better people, and the teachers never said to them, "You don't have the same opportunities as Warren." My parents certainly never said anything like that, but it was there, and it was there throughout the society. Well, in the investment world, you really, if you're emotional about investments, you're not going to do well. I mean, facts are facts, and reason is reason, and you can develop all these attachments or angers or whatever about your stock. I mean, you may love the ones that go up and hate the ones that go. That's crazy. I mean, the stock doesn't know you own it. You may have all these feelings about the stock. The stock has no feelings about you. It's going to reflect what the company behind the stock does. So our Charlie Munger's and my investment decisions and our business decisions don't have emotion in them. We have plenty of emotions for other situations. I mean, it's not that we're unemotional about the people we care about or anything of the sort, but business and investment decisions, if you get emotions in the equation, you're going to do a lot of dumb things. I really think that business in America, obviously the country's developed, new products come along and all of that, but I think the role of managers really hasn't changed significantly. I mean, you want people who are leaders, you want people who can see over the next hill and people are willing to follow them. You want people that are always dissatisfied with the status quo and figure there's a better way of making that widget or getting to market or whatever it may be. The market system that this country has enjoyed is remarkable in terms of unleashing human potential, and it continues to do that decade after decade, and that's why in my lifetime alone, the real GDP per person in the United States has gone up 6 for 1 in one person's lifetime. I mean, it's when you think of the centuries that in the past where humans at the end of the century were living exactly the same as at the start of the century, and then you see the galloping pace of progress in this country since 1776, it makes you realize we really have found the secret sauce in a market system. Now, there's a lot of things that also need some tempering in a market system, but it does lead to more and more goods and services that people want than any other system in the world. The nature of an advanced market system is to concentrate greater and greater rewards on the people that happen to be adapted very well to it, and to leave a greater and greater distance between them and the people that absolutely are necessary to their success further behind. So the gap will widen absent taxation or other government policies that treat the people, that do something to ameliorate that difference between those who have market skills of enormous value. Just an arbitrageur in New York who makes tens of millions of dollars a year spotting little discrepancies in price compared to a soldier in Afghanistan, who's getting shot at for a pittance per month. So it's a wonderful system for turning out, the market system is a wonderful system for turning out lots of goods and services. It's going to distribute them more and more unequally as it progresses. It's a natural phenomenon. It's not because people are evil or anything of the sort. And so there has to be some countervailing activities, primarily by government, to make sure that in an incredibly prosperous society, the people who work hard and are good citizens don't end up really being left behind in an abysmal way. The philanthropy comes from the realization that money that has no utility to me, it can't buy me one thing. I've got everything I want, and I could have everything I want with 1% of the net worth I have, or even 1/10 of 1% of the net worth I have. On the other hand, that money has enormous utility to other people. It can save lives, it can educate people, it can do all kinds of things. So it's silly for me to not transfer that utility over to people who can use it. It's doing me no good. Well, I wouldn't say that greed has gotten me in trouble. I don't think greed is a big part of investing. I mean, investing is an attempt to put capital into places where it's going to produce a very good return. But I think usually greed has some aspect of perhaps of envy in it. It's the aspiration just to have money for its own sake. Money really doesn't do you any good beyond a point. So greed would be sort of an illogical pursuit. I want to do intelligent things, and I want to do them. I'm doing on my own behalf. I'm doing on behalf of the shareholders of Berkshire. I would not want greedy partners. I mean, if I've got greedy partners, I've got a problem. I'd like them to go elsewhere. I would like people to be my partners who expect a reasonable return from intelligent decisions made over a long period of time. I read the Omaha World Herald. I read the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and I also read USA Today. Well, probably the worst mistakes involve not understanding other people as well as you might. I mean, I'm not as smart in a technical sense. I'm not nearly as smart as I was 50 years ago. If you gave me a test involving memory or ability to pick up new ideas or do math in my head or whatever it might be, I would not score as well as I would have when I was 20 or 30. I think I know a lot more about people than I knew when I was 20 or 30. So that I wish I'd known as much about people when I was 20 as I think I know now. It would have been helpful in a lot of ways. Well, there are going to be crooks in every society. I don't think our society breeds more of them than other societies. But there are people that, for one reason or another, go down the wrong path. And they do that in the business world sometimes. They do it in the investing world. And I think that just because of my background, sometimes I can spot the people that are doing it in the investing world sooner than the authorities end up catching up with them. So there have been times when both Charlie Munger and I have pointed out certain activities that we think are either distasteful or dishonest, but that will be with us forever. I mean, there's big money in investing, in finance, and business, huge money, and there are various ways to cheat, and people figure out new ones as time goes by, and sometimes the authorities are very slow to catch on to what's going on. There tends to be more of that, I believe, you can't prove it, during bull markets than during ordinary markets. People's morals seem to loosen up as stocks rise rapidly in price, and there's a feeling that kind of anything goes, and that the other guy's doing it, so why shouldn't I? And that was what was going on in the late 60s when I wound up my partnership. There were a lot of people getting very rich by playing games, basically, in stocks. And I didn't like my results being compared with their results. They were going to beat me in the game, and then I didn't want to do what they were doing. So that's one major reason I wound up the partnership. The first time we had our meeting of the Graham Group was in 1968, and when the 11 of us met with Ben Graham, basically we were saying to Ben, how long can this go on? Because there were all kinds of games being played on Wall Street, and the press applauded them, and investors applauded them, and these people were becoming heroes. And basically, they were engaged in creating mirages with accounting. And Ben said it could go on a long time, but it'll come to an end eventually. And of course, that's what happened. It has to be there. Honesty is, first of all, I have to be honest with our shareholders. I've got, I think, over 1 million shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway. They're my partners, and they have entrusted me with the money. And it's one reason in the annual report I try and tell them about mistakes I've made, as well as, I believe it's an annual report, not an annual sales document. It's a lot easier, as Charlie says, you don't have to remember what you said if you're really saying what's the truth as you go along. When I'm no longer around, Berkshire's culture is so deep, and to some, I wouldn't call it unique, but it's certainly special. And it permeates our board of directors, it permeates our shareholders base, it permeates our managers. So I think it would be very difficult come in and change the culture in any major way. I think that it would be rejected like a foreign object. So I think we're so big that we can't have percentage results anything like we've had in the past, but we can be a very decent business, and I think it can go on for a very, very long time without changing its character. The sums involved will get larger as it goes along, but the basic principles around Berkshire, it's one of the reasons I stick them in the back of the annual report. I've written the principles of the economic principles of Berkshire. I put it in the annual report for 35 years or so. Nobody else does that in their reports, but that's the way we look at the company, and we want our partners to understand that. And I'm not only boxing myself in when I put those in, I'm sort of boxing in my successor too. And to some extent, I try to write in the annual report certain things that will box in my successors to some degree, but because Berkshire has to fit. It has to be a certain kind of structure and operation over the years, and I've had 50 years plus to build that structure, and I think that I'm sure virtually that my successors, more than one, will follow the same general path. They'll do things differently, obviously, but they won't do things differently in terms of the basic tenets of the business. I've been very lucky in family. I've been lucky in I've been lucky in geography. I mean, I've been lucky in the time when I was born. I mean, it would not have been as much fun being born 200 years ago. I think about that every time I go to the dentist. It's a different world now than that. I mean, just think of childbirth, a few hundred years ago or something of the sort. We are very lucky that, or at least I consider myself very lucky I was born in 1930 rather than 1730. There's an enormous amount of luck. How you're wired, whether I was born female or male, whether I was born black or white. I mean, that was huge, in 1930. It's still big, but it was night and day in terms of the opportunity I was going to have. If I'd been born black, I would not have, who knows where I would have ended up, but I certainly would have been, I would have had a whole different life. It had nothing to do with me.